Welcome to the 2021 Baby Gown So Long series. This is the shadow work embroidery edition, so grab your pattern pieces. Now my pattern pieces were still in the developmental stages, but yours are printed on tissue. And I am using the fabulous voile fabric that is manufactured for Speckler Vogel Fabrics. So to begin, I ironed my fabric so the selvage edges were together and that ripped edge was also together, making sure that everything is square. And this gown is cut on the double fold down that center front, center back, and then one single fold across the shoulders. So I'm folding my fabric as such and lining up the lines on my fabric so everything matches. Yes, a big table would be lovely instead of my ironing board, but I'm just using what I have. One day I will have myself a big old table to cut on. Anywho, because I'm doing the embroidery work before cutting out my gown, I'm just marking the neckline curves as well as the hem and the side seam lines. And then I unfold my fabric and place it on my pattern piece so I can trace the embroidery motif, making sure to line up the curves of the neckline, hem, and all that jazz. Now on to the fun part, all that yummy shadow work embroidery. I'm going to start off with the bow in this soft baby pink floche color, and I am using one strand of floche at a time for the entire motif. And yes, I tie a knot into my thread. I know it's not proper, but it's what I do most of the time. Such is life. So with any shadow work embroidery, the idea is to go back and forth between two sets of lines, curves, whatever. I have a whole video that dives into curves and lines and all of that and how it applies to sewing. But basically you'll do the backwards running stitch as you go back and forth, and that'll cause the underside to be filled in with the thread, giving that shadow of a color effect. When I'm ready to tie off, I use those threads on the underside to loop my thread into, which creates a circle, and I go through that circle once or twice to secure my thread, and then I send my needle underneath those cross threads so I can hide my tail. Shadow work embroidery is quite easy and looks so impressive, at least in my opinion. It's one of my favorite styles of embroidery work. It's kind of the best of both worlds, being easy but also looking it just looks so neat, doesn't it? Oh, but one thing to mention, be cautious with situations where one side is significantly longer than the other side. Like for the curves on the top of the bow, you'll see how I've decreased the stitches on the inside curve while keeping the stitches on the outside curve longer. This is because I need to cover more distance on that outside of the bow than on the inside. And I find it's helpful to keep looking at that finish line, if you will, which in this case is the point at the bottom. And then I see how each side compares in length to that finish line. That helps to know if you need to decrease the stitches on one side to let the other side keep up. I hope all that makes sense. So for the center of the flower, I did French knots, but you could definitely do a shadow work circle instead, and I will show how to do that after this sweet petal. So the petal is done in the same manner as the bow. I used the lighter shade of the baby pink, and I went from one side to the other, just that back and forth, until the entire petal was filled in. So let's do a shadow work circle now, and this is the same idea as going from one side to the next, but you're going to go around one half of the circle one way and the other half of the circle the other way, and you'll see how your stitches will just meet together, giving you a filled in circle. Finally, let's do those leaves, and aren't they so sweet looking? So I start at the point of the leaf, going back and forth the same manner as we've done with all the other shadow worked motifs here, and then switching to just stitches down the stem of the leaf. So I keep my thread on the concave upside of the curve and continue my stitches down until I get to the bottom of the leaf. And now that all the embroidery work is complete, I fold my fabric so there's a double fold down the center front, center back, as well as one fold at the shoulders. And then I line everything up with the pattern piece and I cut my gown out. I also used the bottom of the pattern piece to cut out the hem for the gown, but again, my pattern was still in the developmental stages, and you have a separate piece of tissue pattern, separate pattern piece, whatever, for the hem, for that fabric hem. And this is one of my favorite parts in the hand embroidery process, getting to iron those marks away. It is so satisfying, reveals the magic of the embroidery, cleans it all up to a pretty sparkle. It never gets old for me. So now we are going to construct the dress, which comes together in a few easy steps. First, we need to hem those sleeves. You could do this by simply folding over the raw edge twice and sewing that down in place, either by hand or with your machine. Or you could attach some edge lace to the hem of the sleeve. That would look delightful as well. There are so many options. Now I'm going to do some pin stitches. So to do this, I'm taking some lightweight thread and setting myself up to work from right to left. This is going to be worked in a square, if you will, like a square pattern. So you'll start at the bottom right corner, go to the top right corner, over to the top left corner, and repeat that twice, giving a little tug to get those holes to open up. And then from the top right corner, go to the bottom left corner. Just rinse and repeat this pattern. It's like anything else. Once you do it a couple times, you'll just start to do it, and it goes surprisingly quickly, and it leaves these pretty little holes that just sparkle at you. So now I'm going to join one side seam using a French seam. It does not matter which side seam you pick, just pick one and join her together with a French seam, and then pick that same side seam to join the fabric hem. I fold the top of the fabric hem down about 1/4 inch, and to do the top of the curves, I start by folding that down at the point and then getting both curves to go into place after that. Since I want my fabric hem to be on the outside of my gown, I am placing the fabric hem's right side to the wrong side of the gown. So again, the fabric's hem's right side will be touching the wrong side of the gown. And I sew that together at the bottom of the hem, and then I understitch, making sure that the seam and the understitching, all of that jazz, is going on the gown side, not on the fabric's hem side, since the fabric hem will be on the outside of the gown, right? So it needs to go on the gown side of the fabric. I iron that hem into place, pinning on top of the fabric hem as I go along. And I can join the other side seam at this point, but before I do that, I just check to make sure the fabric hem is lining up, because this is a good opportunity to adjust if needed. You know, things happen. If you need to adjust 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch, do so, and nobody will know. I won't tell. Now I'm doing a folded placket on this gown, and I have a video that goes into great detail on that whole process that I will link down below. So finally, I fold the neckline down twice and apply the same pin stitching technique that I did to the sleeves. And to secure that hem in place, you could definitely do the pin stitching. But instead, I just basted my hem in place first. And then I used the pale yellow color to make French knots around as marked on the pattern piece. It went super fast, and I just think it's a really sweet touch. So there you go, this sweet baby gown out of voile with shadowwork embroidery. Check out this lovely handkerchief linen gown embellished with cotton embroider Madeira style embroidery as we continue this baby sew along series.